Hello and welcome. In this video we are going to be talking about CSS transitions. So in the first part of the video we are going to talk about what a transition is and the properties that you can control to make these transitions happen. And then I am going to step right into the first couple of exercises that are part of the lab, where you will be changing the opacity and the size of some images. The idea of a transition is that you can now control the animation speed in which that change happens. So for example, if you think about a navigation menu where you hover over a piece of text and it changes color or the background changes color, it happens immediately. It's an instantaneous change. But when you use CSS transitions, you can control multiple properties to customize how that transition happens. And just by doing some of these pieces, you can actually make it appear to be animated. And for example, this type of animation, because it's cross-browser and cross-platform, so it can be used on multiple browsers like Chrome, Safari, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, and any number of other smaller browsers. It works across those as long as they are CSS 3 compliant, and it works across platforms, meaning you can be on any sort of device, whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux. And this is one of the big reasons that Flash animations have gone by the wayside, is because these are device and platform agnostic, meaning it doesn't matter what they're on and you don't have to install any additional software. So to create these transitions, we have 4 properties. The first property is, what are you going to actually transition? Some properties can only there's only some properties rather that can be transitioned, and there's actually quite a significant list. And some of those examples are color, like you saw in the first screen that I had, width, position, which is also actually I used margin to change the position of the image that you saw, and font sizes. If you're more interested, there is a list, and this is also provided in the assignment, that shows you all of the different properties that can be transitioned. In this particular exercise, we're only going to be working with a few of them, because once you understand how one of them works, the rest come naturally, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but you'll get the idea. So that's the first one. That's your transition property. The second is the transition duration. This is how long that transition lasts in seconds or milliseconds. And that's talking about how long it takes to get from one state to the next. And so this, for example, I have it set at 2 seconds to transition each of these items. And in order to keep them here, because notice I hover off of them, this happens when I hover over them. When I hover off of it, I have it set at 1800 seconds, which is about 20 minutes, I think, if I remember my math correctly. So it doesn't transition back right away. Thirdly, we have the transition timing function. This is also known as ease or easing, and this is one of them that we will be working with. What this does is it controls the speed curve. I know this sounds kind of strange, but the speed curve of the transition. An example of that is the speed curve might indicate that the transition starts slowly, then picks up speed, and ends. It might start out slowly, pick up speed, and then slow down. It might be steady. It might be the same all the way across. Then there is some things that we can do to control those, which is a Bezier curve, and we're going to have an example of that in one of the exercises that we complete. And you'll get to play around with how that affects the speed and transition of an item. And finally, we have the transition delay. For example, if you don't want to have your transition effect take place immediately, you want a slight delay, then you would do this in milliseconds or seconds, just as you would do the duration. So this means that if you hover over something, it wouldn't happen immediately, and it would be delayed by however long you set it. Note, of these transition properties, there are only two that need to be set, and that is the transition property itself. So whether that's the width, the height, the color, the margin, whatever it may be. And the second is the transition duration. Because if by default that transition duration is at 0, and of course if it's at 0, nothing's going to happen. The others, the timing effect and the delay, are automatically defaulted. The transition timing function is defaulted at just standard ease, meaning it moves at one constant speed across the page, or whatever distance you have it covering, or if it's change of color, it's at a consistent rate. And transition delay is automatically set at 0, so it will immediately start to make the transition happen as soon as you hover over the element that you have set up to do the transition. So you don't have to set those, but they're there in case you want to add some additional control or customization to what you're having happen. So some examples of what we're going to be working with in this exercise is we have some opacity transitions, and in this we have this set so that the opacity itself is changing over the duration of 1 second. As we go over each of these, we'll hover in and hover out, and you can see how these are changing. And they're not just immediately clicking over. The other one that we're going to work with in this exercise is changing the size. So as you can see, we mouse over, and when we leave it, it reduces back to its original size. Pretty slick considering that this is just done in CSS.